we have to find some way to like just bridge that disconnect, because if once people realize that like if we had Medicare for all on a national level, you would be saving thousands of dollars as a private insurance participant.
Hmm.
Like you you can save money under our plans basically. Like we're not trying to raise your taxes, we're not trying to provide free services to anything, we're trying to provide a safety net for people to not get swept under the rug. I like what
Right.
Andrew Yang said, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but like it's a good framing. Like it's like capitalism where you start, where no one starts at zero, where like everyone is at least has the chance to get ahead, and
Hmm.
like that's what happens when you have healthcare for everybody, education for everybody, and all of these other things. Like high school degrees were used to be required. Like that used to be like what you needed to get into the job market.
Right.
Now you need a college degree to get into the job market. And college is hundreds of thousands of dollars. Kids don't know what they're going to do. And then they go into this school where they get hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And then they have to pay that off by joining the financial industry or something like that.
Right.
Like this is just, it's like a negative feedback loop in that like
Right.
it'll just keep creating its own problems. And then it's just so hard to break free from that because people, like you said, don't realize that they'll be making more money by, or they'll be spending less money by supporting these type of systems.
Yeah, it's like, people get all caught up in the concept of redistribution, right? And they think about like redistribution on a top level thing. Like I'm going to take the money of wealthy people, we're going to redistribute it, which is like, yes, obviously the policy works to a certain level like that, right? But there's also this concept of redistributing your expenses, right? Like it's taking our individual like cost of living and redistributing the way that that money is forced to be spent, so that we pay more in one area but the amount that we save in another is so much more that all of a sudden, on the whole, right, like the net number that we're paying is less. So that's like, it's and it's hard to sort of like the it can be difficult to explain that interconnectivity to folks, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges that the left faces, or that like the populists, populist humanitarians face when trying to really grapple with that, is like, how do I express to somebody that it's not just about redistributing the earnings of somebody who quote unquote worked really hard. I don't know how hard Jeff Bezos worked. You know what I mean?
Right.
I really don't know how hard he as a single man worked, or whether or not that labor is worth the however many bill. I think he actually just became a trillionaire. So like,
Yep.
it's like, how do we, like, how is what he did worth that much? I genuinely want to hear the explanation, and is it just ideological, right? Like, is it like what is the actual meaningful context for justifying earning that much, you know?
Right. And I feel like there almost is no answer to that, or I've never heard an answer to that by anyone who supports or defends a billionaire's right to exist in a system
Yeah.
where they can make $13 billion last month. Yeah, it's like where I feel like at the end, at the core of that, like comes from a lack of understanding of like what $1 billion actually is. Like putting this amount of wealth into like an understanding where regular people that are engaging with these conversations can be like, you're not going to take away my first billion. Like, oh well, what is $1 billion
Right.
relative to what $25 million is? It's completely different,
Yeah.
completely different. It's a massive amount of wealth that it's just the only way that you're able to accumulate that is by exploiting the labor of others. And
Mm-hmm.
like that's another bridge that needs to be built, like you said, from the left. Like we have to put these socioeconomic scales into like relation and compare them, like show that $1 billion is like this, while $1 million is like that, or whatever. Like
Yeah. It was
this,
like I've seen like
the
like
relationship between people.
TikToks with like the grains of rice and stuff like that. Like
Yeah,
there's all these
yeah,
like
exactly,
visual aids.
exactly. Those like visual aids to show you what $1 billion is. I've seen one like in Minecraft with like gold blocks, like one gold block, this is $1 million, and then there's like a massive $1 billion gold block, and it's like, yeah,
This is
that's
the
what that wealth
difference.
looks
Yeah.
like this is the difference when we talk about taxing this. It's not like he's still going to be very wealthy if we taxed him the way Bernie Sanders say wanted to tax him.
Right.
He would still be one of the wealthiest men in the world.
Yeah.
But the country would be so much better off because we would have all these things. There is nothing wrong with that. And what we have to make people realize, I feel like at the end of the day, the left needs to adopt its own propaganda in a sense to counter the propaganda that's being pushed out by, the capitalists, basically. Like, because
Mm-hmm.
just to make a broad term for all those different issues, like the capitalists have pushed propaganda for the past however many years, and we're now at a point where like the left has a chance to take up that same model and
Mm-hmm.
use that to make some meaningful change that's not based in greed, that's not based in exploitation or hatred of others, but like love, understanding, a sense of community, all of these other things. Like we can utilize the tools that have, like, I know Leaf said we can't use the tools of the master to burn down the master's house, but I
Yeah.
actually disagree with that. I think we can use the tools of the master to burn down the master's house because there are tools. We're using the tools. And I
Sure.
think that using propaganda, using the same methods that they've used to win, we can use to win too. And I don't think, yeah, I don't know.
Well,
I've
okay,
kind
so
of
this
lost my
is
train of thought,
actually
but
no, but I think and I actually this is sort of this I think this sort of gets into that like there was a question that I had sent you that I wanted to really like dive on. Um and I think what I'd like to do is sort of, you know, I'll frame it up. I want to sort of like I'll put this question out here and then I'll we'll sort of like watch this clip and then we'll sort of move from there, right? So I mean, we had a chance to sit down at the sort of like the sit-in at the police department this past weekend, and you and I were talking about like the types of media that influence us, right? And but we both acknowledged like, oh yeah, TMBS has been really huge for helping us understand things and see stuff more clearly. And it's like 2 days later, the news breaks that Michael Brooks has passed away. And like that loss feels so immeasurable within the left. At least, I mean, for me, I don't know. I don't know where you're feeling about that, but I know that like there was just this huge outpouring, globally speaking. I mean, even Lula da Silva from the former president of Brazil shared about it, and it's like, which is just like that. It was incredible to see that, and I know like I think everybody recognized it. Like Michael would have loved that.
yeah, it was beautiful to see the outpouring of support for what I thought he was just such a obscure youth. I mean, I just really didn't even think that he was that well loved, and it was beautiful to see that like there are this many people that loved and respect his vision and are willing to carry on his vision. And yeah, I totally agree with you. I think he's going to be, yeah.
Yeah,
It
I
was a
think
hard one. That was a hard death for sure.
it really was. It was tough. And so, and actually with that, I'm just going to play this clip because I think this is like, I, I want everybody to hear what he's saying right here because I think this speaks so much to like a lot of what we've just been trying to tackle right here. So I'm just going to play this.
Truly global to the extent we can, local, national, and international simultaneously, east, west, north, south, but from a place of actual growth and empathy. And this is where, again, this questions of consciousness come in. The questions of cultivating empathy, cultivating compassion, cultivating awareness, the complete antithesis of social media modes. Long-term thinking, compassion, seeing complexity, comfort with oneself, solitude, the opposite of instant gratification, the attempt to constantly humanize and not dehumanize your fellow humans. These are all completely countervailing forces to the market technologic that subsumes all of us today. What does it actually mean to be truly global to the extent we can?
So I think, like, for me, that was like, that's a really incredible sentiment right there, and I think to sort of get on to the point you had just made about, like, we as the left need to sort of formulate our own, as you put it, propaganda. But I think it's just in a lot of ways too, it's just media and messaging, right? And it was something that Michael would do with such a deft, like, skill, with his ability to be fluid and make people feel comfortable and to actually cultivate that empathy, right? I guess, like, how do you feel, for any of us, how do you feel we can carry on the legacy of that messaging and promotion of true empathetic solidarity that reaches across whatever divides we are perceiving, in the media, in the office, if like for elected officials, engaging in local activism, whether it's like actually being on the street and protesting, or you're literally volunteering at your local church for, community supper, right? Like, what is, like, I think, what's your view of that particular type of media and messaging, and, like, how can we better engage with that moving forward? Like, how do we produce the type of content that's so that counteracts the right-wing propaganda, that techno-capitalism, right? That, like, where there's just so profit-based and really structured around the idea of needing an enemy, right? Like, this idea that I can't get where I need to go without an enemy. And then, like, what can we do through the, as you're indicating, the master's tools to provide support mechanisms for those people? And then, beyond that, how do we deal with losing these voices? How do we deal with having a vacuum like that? And how do we as people who care step up and fill that void?
Yeah, I mean, first thing that comes to mind would be like Michael used humor a lot to make his points, and he was, a humorous person who, like, was really genuine, and like, it's hard to even describe, but, like, he used humor in a way that, like, explained his points perfectly. And even if you were a conservative watching that show, I think you could have gotten that joke. And, like, if you laugh at a joke like that, like a left-wing joke, I can't even think of an example, but, like, laughing at a joke is the acknowledgement that the joke is based in some sort of truth, because, I mean, that's where humor comes from. And then from there, it makes them question their own ideology, because he makes jokes about, the right-wing ideology or something like that, and they're like, that's actually kind of true. I didn't know we thought of it like that. He's actually making a sort of good point through that joke. And then that'll get them thinking, even subconsciously maybe, about what they support. And after he does that joke, and then he goes on to explain the policy and whatever is going on after that joke, the culture, sociological aspects of whatever the joke was talking about. I think that's really how you would approach, like, a media or something like that. Like, we can't be doom and gloom 100% of the time. I mean, that's what cable news is. Like, we have to operate not from fear, but, like, not even, I don't even know necessarily the word. Like, the only word that comes to mind would be, like, from hope. Like, we have to operate from, like, a sense of the future, and we can do this together, and, like, we're gonna have humor and art and understanding and all this. And TMBS and the Majority Report, they capture that fairly perfectly. And I love the like, framing that they put for every issue, because just it's so well thought out, so well
Right.
spoken that it's like, even if you don't already support, like if you're listening to Kyle Kalinske or something like that, you have to really already support the policy that he supports to want to listen to him, because he's so visceral and aggressive with what he supports. But if you're listening to like TMBS and you hear that joke, and then you're like, oh well,
Yeah, the
shit.
Chris
Like,
Matthews impression, or like right wing Mandela, or like, you know.
exactly, yeah, because he also criticizes the left and the idiocy of um the cable news left, and like,
Yeah, Nation of Islam Obama, like.
exactly,
It's so good.
exactly,
It's so good.
exactly, yes, yes, like this is how we change people's minds, by doing things like that. And that is it's I don't know how anyone is going to be able to fill his space, or fill his shoes. I don't think anyone truly will be, but the template that he left for his show, and the way he conducted himself in his show, is I think the perfect way to move forward in media and in like doing things. And just
Right.
at the core of it, it's like moving away from fear as the driver, not just in media but in everything. Like, we have to start separating ourselves from the cable news fear driven world and
Yeah.
start living in reality almost.
And make it fun to talk about it, right?
Yes.
Like, it's like,
Yes.
yeah, this is hard stuff. Like, at the very least, we can try and have a good time. Like,
Right.
it
Heather
doesn't mean we
Stockwell said
take
this.
it
We
less
were having a
seriously.
conversation about how tough it is to be an organizer, and like how stressful and exhausting it is. And she was like, yeah, someone said to me, fighting fascism should be fun, Heather. And I was like, yes, fighting fascism should be fun. Like, we should be having a good time in fighting the fascist forces in this country. And that's exactly what we need to be doing. This should be fun work, and exciting work too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, like, okay, so I guess sort of the last question that I want to like ask you, because, and this is like something that I think is really like, I've been trying to sort of reflect on that intersectionality, right? Like, as you know, as a 31-year-old white guy who, you know, just doesn't like, there's so much that I missed in terms of what I needed to learn, and I didn't learn it until I left here and moved to Boston for a while. And like, you know, like, something that I really want to try and do, because, you know, again, with recognizing that aspect of my identity, a big part of what I want to do here with the channel is to elevate voices of, you know, like, elevate people from the LGBTQ community, elevate neurodiverse people, elevate anybody who's not white, basically. And elevate those, like, you know, any kind of gender diversity, all of these things, right? And I want to hear about the experiences, and I want to make this sort of like a forum for that. And I guess if you feel comfortable, right, I'd like to hear some of your personal experiences with racism in this community. And I mean, you don't necessarily have to drop names or anything like that, but particularly at Conval as like a rising senior, and I know that COVID probably has changed this a little bit, but how do we like, and you also talked about, you know, relating to conservatives at school, and it's like, how do we approach educating and dismantling that racism, especially when it comes from people who, you know, live in a house with an Obama sign outside? You know what I mean? Like, what is that experience like? And then, as someone on the receiving end of it, what would you say is the sort of the steps that you would like to see happen? You know, and I want to be clear that, like, I'm not asking for your take on it. I think racism is a white created problem, so white people need to solve it. You know, like, that's like straight up. I don't think that it's at all cool for white people to be turning and asking anybody of color to be told how they should behave, like, or what they should do. I think that's a role of self-reflection that needs to occur independently. But it is important to hear those experiences so that we can internalize literally what's happening and not be deaf to them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I think of like personal experiences I've had in Conval or the community, it's hard for me to get like angry or anything at these people, just because however terrible the situation may have been, whether that be like someone calling me the N-word in a serious or joking context, or like very subtle racism in the form of like, oh, black people do this obviously, or like, I gotta hide my bag, like some like just idiotic teenage jokes. Like I understand some people getting angry at them, and I just feel like, especially for the experiences with race in Conval, where you have so many of these people, like you said, who go home to a house that has an Obama sign in the yard, or a house where their parents are like, I'm anti-racist, I'm reading this book called Anti-Racism or something like that. It's a hard dynamic to be in, because these kids are, I don't think they truly understand how racist their jokes are. And it's like, I'm not going to be informing people of their racism every day at school, because that would be just exhausting. So, I mean, it's a terrible thing to say, but you have to, I mean, my personal experience would be just sort of take it. I mean, like when someone does something racist, it's never been my response to like call them out on it, which may be the wrong thing, obviously, but like in that moment, as a black person with 15 other kids around that you've known since second grade, it's a very tough situation to be in. And I know that there's other black people and people of color in Conval that feel the same way, or feel a similar way. And that leads to like the problem just being even bigger, because then they're like, well, my black friend let me say it because he's not going to say anything in front of me because of it. And it's like, your black friend might just be uncomfortable saying that to you because he is your friend. And like, black people are friends with white people in this school, and black people are friends with racist white people in this school. And that's just, it's a weird reality that has been created in Conval, where like nobody wants to address race, not just the black people, just nobody wants to address race. And yeah, it just perpetuates the problem. And the steps I would see for like addressing that would be for the administration, or just the school in general, and curriculums across the country, to start uplifting people of color, not just in Black History Month, but in the curriculum in general. Like if I would imagine if kids were listening to people like Cornel West and his take on intersectionality and race at a young age, where you're just starting to learn about history, or I know that we did the civil rights movement in third grade, I think, that's when it first started. Is that really the grade you should be learning about Martin Luther King, racism, segregation, all these things? Maybe in a general sense, but like, no, you should not be learning about the riots and the violence that's been happening, but you should be learning about racism. And when we teach racism, it shouldn't just be like the horrible events that have happened. It should be like Cornel West's theories on race, Cornel West's theories on the white liberal, Cornel West's theories on, especially for this town, Cornel West's theories on like, and it doesn't even have to just be Cornel West, but like that's just the person.
Well, I mean, other people that come to mind when you're saying this are like Kianga Yamada Taylor or Adolph Reed. Like there are plenty of Bell Hooks is another really, really crucial one. There are so many voices. John A. Powell. Again, it's like there are so many voices that we can listen to, and so like, and I want to like kind of hone in on a couple things you said right there, because I think you did a really big service by saying these things. Is like, one, it's really important for white people in this community to understand just how exhausting it is for a black person in this community to deal with that racism, to understand that the reason y'all don't want to call it out or you don't want to do it is because you're just tired of it. It's like, and that's like, that's probably more than anything else. I think like it's like exhaustion with having to deal with the subtle racism and feeling like I don't have the energy to call this out every time. It shouldn't be on y'all to do that work. like it's on us to promote that level of self-reflection. And then I think what precipitates that self-reflection, right, is to completely fundamentally change who and how we teach the civil rights movement, the history of slavery in this country, and just like history in general. And also maybe it involves like trying to incorporate psychology and sociology into educational programs from a much earlier age. Like there's a huge part of me that doesn't understand why, like if we have a social studies department, why is sociology not a part of that? Right? Like
Yes.
if we have a
Yeah.
science department, why is psychology not a part of that? Right? Like why are we not trying to engage with these deeper understandings of human experience in a on a public school level all the time, right? Like it's, and it gets back to like, I think like I've said this before, that I believe that education is the keystone to democracy, right? You can't have a functioning democracy in the sense that people want to imagine it, right? Like you can't have that unless your people are genuinely educated about what they need, like their issues and their history and their relationship to each other, right? That's all so crucial. And
Yeah.
that type of education will promote the just sort of the base level understanding for white folks in a majority white community to just always be inherently inspecting their own positions regardless of what the issue is, right? Like that teaching that empathy and breaking down like that, while we may be experiencing it in an identity related context, the solution is not an identity based solution. It's like it's a self based solution. It's an introspective or a self-reflective based solution. It's a self-awareness solution, and again, to teach people that that's not a state that you attain and you exist within once you don't reach it and then you're done with that work. That's something that we always have to keep coming back to every single day. That's a struggle that we always have to work on. I don't know if you
Hmm.
feel like that's
No,
a reasonable characterization, but
I totally agree with that. I definitely agree that we need sociology classes or like some kind of psychology classes early on, and like it shouldn't just be a junior or senior class in high school. It should be, we should be teaching children these social skills, how not to be, just social skills. We should be teaching these children social skills early on. And I hear that a lot in the school. Like, why am I learning about this when I don't even know, you know, the proper way to conduct myself in a social situation?
right.
Like these, we're leaving our kids to figure it all out on themselves. And I think a lot of the administration thinks it's like it should be a home thing, sort
Mm-hmm.
of. And I get that in a sense, but like it shouldn't just be a home thing. I think we should be teaching the fundamentals of sociology at school, not
Yeah.
just for social skills, but just like for all of it. Just I
Well,
think that would help a whole lot with racism in school if people were able to truly understand, like, what is empathy, what is compassion, what are
mm-hmm.
these words mean, what do any of it mean, like
Yeah,
help
and
kids understand the concepts that you're teaching them, and
right.
the social concepts that would allow them to not be racist or to uh, be self-introspective, to address their own racism.
Mm-hmm.
Teach those skills in children that are just coming up in middle school, where they aren't inherently racist. They might be racist, but just as a consequence of having racist parents, or just not understanding what it is. It's not their fault. It's just a lack of education. And I agree with that completely. Like, we can't have a functioning democracy until we have an educated populace.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
exactly. Well, and I think, if there's one thing that I feel like I've really noticed about, like something I've taken away from seeing these national protests, these global protests, is that like this is a societal issue. It's really easy for people to write it off and say, like you pointed out, like it's a home issue, it's a church issue, it's a spiritual issue. And like sure, maybe that's true, but if anything, we've learned that society doesn't recognize that yet. You know what I mean? Society doesn't grapple with that part of it. Um, there's no acknowledgement that it is actually a societal problem, and maybe we should be coming up with some fundamental ways to address that in schools. You know, I mean, I'm not saying that there isn't a sociology teacher in public schools. I'm sure there are public schools that have those, but it's not something that's mandated the same way math is. You know what I mean? And
And it's something
yeah,
that the curriculum has to be changed in too, I'm sure. Like
yes,
the curriculum that as it exists in like sociology and how it's taught in high school, if it is, I don't know if it is in Conval, but if it is taught at all, I'm sure it's taught in not the best way,
right,
as most things in high school are. And it's so hard to, it's hard to even have a conversation about these issues, although this one's been great because like it's, I don't know what exactly, it's hard, but like it's just difficult to have conversations about these when you don't know what the curriculum is exactly. Like
right.
when we can't, same thing with the police issue. Like if we don't know what the budget is, how are we supposed to have conversations about what the budget should be? Like
Yeah, yeah. If we don't know
we
what's in the
can't.
reports, how do we know what kind of services we need to be replacing police with? So,
Right. So
yeah,
there's a huge transparency issue on every level. And once you open up that dialogue with the administration and start, because I think that Conval would be open if we had the conversation like, can we introduce Black history into the curriculum as a whole
hmm,
on all of these different issues? Like, can we
right.
teach true Black history, what racism is? I do think that the Conval School District would at least be open to having a conversation on that, and
Let's teach some more
actually
W.B.
addressing that
Du
issue.
Bois. You know, like, come on, man.
Yeah,
Let's get these.
yeah.
Let's get some real folks up in here.
See some real
So,
folks up in here,
yeah,
exactly. And yeah, I really do think that like I don't know, the sociology thing is an interesting one. I'm stuck on that because like I really think that would be a tangible change that could be made that would address a lot of the racism in school, just because again it's not any of their faults. It's I know I've said it before, but like it really is just the fault of the school and the administration. Like there
hmm,
is a subculture of racism in the school, and I've spoken to teachers about it, and when I alert the teachers about it, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them don't even know it's a thing. I mean, this is
yeah,
a result of like there only being like 7% people of color in the school, obviously, but
hmm,
they don't understand that this subculture of racism exists in the school. So if you have the staff and the administration not recognizing this issue, then you have 7% of the population of the school facing this subculture of racism
hmm,
all on its own. And even if you do alert the administration, the most that they're going to do with it is send the person to ISS or whatever, or detention, which, I don't believe in as a form of
right.
punishment. But
Rather than following some
that's
sort of a
just
restorative justice model that would help alleviate the
exactly
actual
like
problem between people.
exactly. And then it just perpetuates. And that's, I mean, another reason it's like past the exhaustion, why you wouldn't want to, as a student in that moment, address someone else's racism is like, okay, I'm gonna address this person calling me the N-word in a
Hmm,
negative way. I'm gonna go to the principal or the dean, Steve Barch, and he's gonna go speak to that kid, tell him what he said was wrong, and then he's probably gonna get ISS and have to stay there all day. So
yeah,
that's just gonna make that kid hate me even more, and
right.
that's just going to make him even more angry at me. That doesn't address the problem at all. If anything, that would perpetuate the problem, because as soon as he gets at ISS, which he will, he's
It's
just going to
worse.
come back.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just going to come back and it's worse. So it's just another part of like just taking it, because there's no outlet for a person of color to go and be like, I am facing racism right now. Like I don't feel safe in my school. I don't feel safe in my classroom. My peers are endangering like my safety by saying these things, and I'm coming to you to address it. Like there's no space for that. And one of the big things we could do to address racism in the school would be like to create a space or have some sort of system in place where these people of color have like, I mean, a big part of it would maybe being hiring a person of color as a teacher. I've gone through my
yeah.
entire school career not having another person of color in the school as
Hmm,
an adult, another person of color as an adult. So
yeah,
just I've felt, and I did have one 7th grade history teacher who alerted me to this, and he was like, if you have anything you need to talk to, like, please come to me, because I know that there is no black teacher here. Like, please come to me if there's anything. And I really appreciated that. And that's what most teachers should be doing, especially if there isn't a person of color in the school. And I'm not saying like diversity quotas or anything like that, but I'm just saying, like,
well, no, but
not
I think
having
that's
that role
a
model.
really good point, though. Like, that is a really good point. You need that, like you need to have a role model that you can identify with.
Right. Like if there was someone that had that same experience, then I would have been in total different situation right now. I would have been able to talk about and express my feelings on like race and what was happening to me as a fifth grader or a 11th grader or something like that, to this person that has lived this experience as well and has older and understands it. And I wouldn't be figuring all of this out on my own, which, you know, I think I did pretty good, but like there are kids that just aren't. And I know people of color in the school that are struggling very hard with how race is in the school. And if they had that role model, then it would be totally different. But, you know,
awesome.
Yeah, like just
creating
those spaces is a huge step forward.
I agree completely. And I mean, I actually need to get running soon because I have to go get more police documents from the townhouse today. But
very important.
Yeah. But I'm just like, Jonah, I'm so glad that you were able to take some time to talk with me today. I mean, I feel like we hit on so many important issues right now. And I'm definitely like, I'm looking forward to plugging this one pretty hard. Like, this was a really solid interview that I think anybody, whether you're in this town or in this state or in this country or on this planet, like, this interview was super, super productive when it comes to understanding the needs of people. And it's like, it's just so refreshing to be able to have that conversation with someone who's like got so much time and space ahead of them to really make a difference. So like, I just really want to thank you so much for taking the time to go do this crazy deep dive with me today. You know?
Yeah. Thanks for providing this platform. I mean, I'm always welcome to do this. This is what I think about most of the time.
Yeah. And I and I tell people, you know, like, I'm like, look, I will do this until someone comes along and does it, you know, like if anybody wants to replace me, I am happy to divulge like any of my skills or tactics or whatever to help elevate other people. You know what I mean? Like, that's the whole point of this, is like, this isn't about me. You know what I mean? Like, it's not about what I think or what I feel like we should be doing. It's about everybody. It's about connecting. And so like, I just want to see, you know, to your point, I want to see more media, you know, like I want to see more voices. I want to plug more people and I want to elevate more folks. And so like, I'm just so glad that we had this opportunity to have this like long form conversation. Cause I think
me too.
Your voice is really, really incredible and super, super important for everything today. So yeah, thanks so much for coming on. And I'm like, absolutely, I want to have you back on soon. And like, we can just sort of like, you know, maybe we'll like, you know, as I'm sort of developing more ideas for the show, I'm like thinking about, you know, doing more commentary episodes, and we can kind of like come up with like a list of issues. We can pick it apart together. You know what I mean? Like, I always find discussing stuff like that helps. So Jonah, thank you so much, man.
Of course. Thanks, Carter. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man. Hey, have a great day, dude.
Yeah, you too. See you later.
Later. Awesome. Wow. That was Jonah Wheeler, folks. And I mean, like, what an incredible young man. I'm so excited to see where he goes and what he does from here. And I'm looking forward to having him back on. That was a really solid conversation. So, thanks everybody so much for tuning in. Obviously, hop down there. You can hit the subscribe button, a little bell, give you notifications. Go to patreon.com/locally sourced, become a patron, support conversations like this, support release of public documents, support local on-location news segments. I've got some clips that I'm working to throw together right now. I know it's been a little bit crazy lately, but I'm definitely going to have more content like that up and available for everybody. Definitely working on trying to think up some new types of content. Want to hopefully introduce more streams to the mix and get more different types of content out there for people. So definitely follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram. And all the links are down below in the description, so definitely hit that stuff up. Tomorrow we'll be talking with Emmett Soldati. He's a candidate for Executive Council District 2. It's Andrew Valinsky's seat. Owner of the business Teetotaler, which has just done immense work to promote community, and specifically the LGBTQ community in Somersworth, New Hampshire, and just in the state in general. So that's a conversation I'm really looking forward to having, and I'm just so elated. Emmett's such a nice guy, and so super looking forward to that. But thanks everybody for tuning in. We just broke 100. Well, I just broke $105 broke $100 on the Patreon, and that was just like, I can't tell you folks how heartening that was, to see that support. So I've gone in, I've updated some of the goals so folks can see what I need to sort of have come in as far as planning for the future, the type of support levels that we need to get to. I would really love to be able to get to at least 50 patrons by the end of the summer. I don't think that's an incredibly difficult task, but I think it's something that we can do. Obviously there's the 100 patron goal. And then once we hit, maybe like about between 300 and 500 patrons on the channel, I can go full time with this work. And start being able to really engage with, getting more equipment, upgrading the streams, all of these things, working with more people from outside the community so that we can relate to local involvement in other locations, whether it's in the country or the world, so that we can actually understand what it means to say all politics are local, and to promote art and music and love and fairness, and I think that's just like, that's the goal, folks. So thank you everybody so much, for anyone who tuned in and watched this. Thanks to everybody who's watching this video later, and yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, folks. Take care.